As far as the cost of solar is, if you're looking at around a PPA or a lease, you should be savings 30 to 40%. I mean, if you're seeing 30 to 40% savings, that's pretty good. 50% even better. And then obviously when it comes to finance or cash, that varies greatly right now. Ever since we got into NEM 3, where we require batteries in Southern California, it varies greatly on what kind of battery you want, whether you want a full backup or you just want an arbitrage battery that's just going to work as long as the grid is up. That's going to make a big difference. So as far as that goes, I mean, I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Can you explain the payback period for solar investment?
The best part about that question is that it comes into where, depending on how you go solar, it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, right? So if you go cash, it makes sense. You're looking at an ROI because you're making an investment at that point where, let's say I put $30,000 down. I want to know how long is it going to take me to get that money back and then see savings moving forward. Well, if you go a PPA or lease, you're not putting anything down. There's no upfront payments, which is funny because most people haven't really looked into solar since there were actually upfront payments. When solar first came out, you had to put $5,000, $10,000 down, and then you could get solar. But now you can go solar, put nothing down. You're just switching from paying $500 a month to $300 a month. So when do you have a ROI? I'd say day one. The day that you don't have to pay $500 or more is the day that you have an ROI.
I want to talk about PPAs right now, but a PPA is basically
power purchase agreement. So a lease, basically switching from Verizon to AT&T.
Yes. So when, from a broker's perspective, it's not a big issue to transfer a PPA from one person to the next. So that's the benefit. But I guess the question that I'm asking, or what is the downside?
The downside really comes from just kind of like the American dream. The American dream is that I want to own my house, right? The American dream is also I want to own my truck. I want to own everything. So when it comes down to it, you don't own that system. So that's the main downside, is that Americans love to own everything. Everything we have, everything I have, I like to own it. I don't want the bank to own my car. I want to own my car. So I would like to buy it myself. So I'd say that's the biggest thing, is that with a PPA, it's kind of like a lease where you don't actually own those panels. But most of the PPAs nowadays, especially the ones that I use, you do have an option to purchase them. So, another negative might be a lot of times on PPAs, there's what's called an escalator. So an escalator is annually your price for your system that you pay monthly will go up by maybe 1.9, 2.9, or 3.9%. 3.9 is the highest I've seen so far. So what this does is it does put you on track to be usually back where you're currently paying within about 20 to 25 years. So you still see huge, massive savings. What it does is it front loads those savings for you.
You get what I'm going.
I mean, over the last 10 years, we've seen an increase of about 70%.
Okay.
Minimum.
10 years, 70%.
70% over the last 10 years.
In Southern California.
In Southern California.
Okay.
So that tells you like SDG&E, SCE, you're around 70%. So that's about 7% a year that they're going up. So what we do with the PPA that people have an option for, I always give people options. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to give you 20 options, but let's see what you want. Let's hone you in. Okay, do you want to pay the same thing today as you will 25 years from now? Or do you want to pay much, much, much less today and more in 25 years? And what most people choose is they say, give me the most savings I can see for the next 10 years, and then I'll deal with year 20 when it gets here. Because you always have an option, too, that you could buy out the system. So your system is going to be a fraction of the cost in 20 years. You can buy that system for a small fraction of what it would be worth today. So why not front load all your savings? And then with the PPA, you also warranty your battery for an extended period of time. Cash in on your savings on your battery, cash in on your front end savings, and then towards the end, you can buy out the system.
Okay. And the real estate broker coming into play here is, I'm thinking, to front load the savings is probably, again, better. if I was to say, because most people stay in their homes for 7 years. So if you want to front load your savings and right, I mean,
Yeah, and front load your savings can be kind of a hit term where it's kind of like it almost sounds negative in a way. But one of the things that I'd like to clarify is like if your system is built correctly, yes, you're front loading savings, but you're not hurting the next person because you shouldn't even be back to what you're paying today for at least 15 to 20 years.
okay, yeah.
That's the biggest
That's a really
thing.
good point. That's a really good point. Because by those 10 years, if the percentages of increases are steady and they're going up what has happened over the last 5 years, even in that 10 years, the savings for that buyer is going to be massive in regards to like what they would pay without solar.
Yeah, and like kind of like how we were talking though, how it's nice to be conservative. Let's say utilities never increase again. I would bet anything that that's not going to happen. But let's just say the utilities will never increase again. They're always going to stay where they're at. The trend will stop.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at a PPA setup for somebody that even if that happened, for the next 20 years, their bills are still less, even without the utilities ever increasing. So now, if that's the case where you still save money, then now we get to just under promise and over deliver, and the utilities are going to continue going up 4 to 8% every single year, and you're going to save even more money than you thought.
Very important point. If it never goes up, if electricity costs do not go up in 20 years, which, to be honest, I mean, I don't want to predict the future. I don't want to be that guy, but you've got to be almost insane to think they're not going to. You would still save money. Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect.
If you can live in that world and you can make sure that you're within those goalposts, then you're fine.
Okay. So the last part of this, are there any hidden costs to solar installations?
Some of the biggest hidden costs, I would say, the biggest part is coming down to your escalator. Make sure you're well informed on what your bill is going to be year after year. Make sure you're double checking that your system is producing enough power. That's the number one thing that I've seen as far as my experience coming into the solar industry is that I see that people have had systems that are drastically undersized in order to get them to have the monthly payments that they want. So they have the monthly payment for the solar that they want, but then they see, oh, I'm only producing 70% of what I actually need. And that's kind of been my way of entering the solar community, has been to say, okay, yes, I could build you something that's not what you need, but what you want. But if I'm going to put my name on it, then it's going to be what you need.
Okay.
And as long as we can reach that together, then we can proceed. So that's the biggest thing. Make sure your system's adequately sized.
Okay.
And then make sure that you have enough batteries now. Batteries and panels. If you have enough of both of those, then you're fine.
Okay, perfect. And the last point I'm going to make, and Matt, is we've talked about this a lot. If you know that you're getting a Tesla next year, or if you know you're going to be putting a pool in your home in the next year, obviously you need to tell whoever you're dealing with that that's going to happen so they can accommodate you on that, right?
Oh yeah, and I mean especially, so for myself, I used to work graveyards quite a bit, and if you're looking at buying an electric vehicle and you're going to be working graveyards, it's very important that you know that you're going to be putting in that Tesla, because that means you're going to charge during the day. If you're charging only during the night, that does affect how you want to compensate for that Tesla. Do you want to make sure that you're offsetting all that usage, or do you want to go ahead and put that on the grid? Because one of the things that happens when you go solar that we haven't really touched on yet is previously to going solar, you might be on what's called domestic. So if you're on domestic with SDG&E and SCE, you're basically on a tier program where, like, let's say I use X number of units here, then I use more and I'm in tier 2, and I use more and I'm in tier 3. When you go solar, you moved over to time of use. So when you're in time of use, that dictates basically saying like, okay, 4 to 9 or 4 to 8, my costs are higher. So it's more so depending on when you use the power. So if you charge your Tesla in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., the power costs are low. But let's say you work nights, so you're not home at night. Now I'm going to charge my Tesla during the day, and some in the swings, then that costs more. So
Okay.
that's in a situation where we would want to give more panels to offset that.